A warm welcome to everybody. It's nice to see that we have so many participants for our IOER Forum. Just some few words about our two presenters today. Patrycia Gerhard is a research associate at the Federal Agency for Nature Conservation, in German called BFN, Bundesamt für Naturschutz, and she's part of the Department of Landscape Planning, Spatial Planning, and Urban Areas. Her current work focuses on researching and promoting urban nature with current focus on species protection in buildings. And we are pretty happy to have her here. Patrycia is a geographer and she studied at the University of Göttingen and the University of Heidelberg. And we are pretty proud that she made her doctorate here at the TU Dresden. And when she was still part of the IOER team, and then she moved over to BFN, is now responsible for urban species protections. Yeah, thanks for the greetings from Viktor Smolensky. And the title she will talk about is Strategies for Urban Species Protection. And our second impulse presentation for today will come from Jessica Hemingway. She's part of our IOER staff member. She studied psychology and graduated with a bachelor at the SUNY College at Buffalo in the US. In 2008, she finalized and graduated with a Master of Arts at the Ohio State University on city and regional planning. So she's combining psychology with spatial planning as well and ecology. And in 2017, she made her doctorate at our DLGS, Dresden Leibniz Graduate School here at the TU Dresden and at the IOER. And she will talk about utilizing urban environmental acupuncture to foster social and ecological change in Central Europe. And we think this both fits quite well together. And I give the floor now to Patrycia, please. We are pretty interested in your talk on strategies for urban species protection. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wolfgang, and welcome everyone. I will talk today about strategies for urban species protection, and I will only briefly talk about formal and informal possible instruments for species protection in the city, and will rather show examples from practice. So, for example, projects in Germany, all over Germany, and also focus on topics such as, or topics that are usually neglected, such as species protection in buildings. As you may know, urban areas play an essential role for biodiversity in Germany. When I talk about biodiversity today, I mainly focus on the diversity of ecosystems and species, plant species, animal species. In urban areas, you can find a high natural diversity of different sites, green spaces, and green structures, which can potentially have a high habitat diversity. And this factor can lead to a high level of different animals and plant species, for example. In the same time, biodiversity is a key element in the provision of ecosystem services for urban populations and makes city worth living in. There is generally a high number or a high potential to provide habitats for a large number of species, but there's also an increasing number of, let's say, well-known species. In Germany, you would say Allerweltsarten. At the same time, we are observing many decreases in biodiversity in urban areas. The main drivers for this development are the introduction of invasive species, increasing soil sealing, the increasing fragmentation of habitats, or also climate change has an impact on biodiversity in urban areas, as well as pollution. A recently published report by FEDA, a research initiative for the conservation of biodiversity funded by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, has clearly shown that the development of biodiversity in urban areas in Germany shows declining trends in many cases. Here in this graph, you can see the trends for red list species in Germany over different ecosystems, such as agricultural land or forests or water bodies, for example. And on the right side, you see the trends for urban areas. And the results of this FEDA study show that there is in general little research on the development of biodiversity in German cities. And the majority of species only occur sporadically in cities, and there is still little data available on the abundance of many species. And if data is available, it shows a constant or negative constant trend. Urban biodiversity also plays an important role in society. Every few years, BFN conducts public surveys on nature awareness. In German, it's called Naturbewusstseinsstudie. And in 2015, the focus was on urban nature, and people were asked, what is nature in the city to you? And 22% of the respondents answered that they associate animals with nature in the city. Another 65% associated vegetation in general with nature in the cities. So we know that there's a high potential for different species in urban areas, and that biodiversity is essential to us people for providing ecosystem services, for example, but also for intrinsic values. Urban biodiversity plays an important role to us. But as demonstrated, the trends of different species in urban areas are showing a decreasing development. So in conclusion, there's a high and essential need to protect urban biodiversity. But what are the main tasks in terms of urban species protection? So it is about the enhancement of habitats for different animals and plants, or the connection of habitats to enable species migration, or the restoration of habitats that are in a bad condition, for example. Also, the protection of species from interferences or in a regulative way, also by laws, and the creation of further habitats and the maintenance of existing habitats. In Germany, we have formal strategies for it, or instruments for urban species protection, such as, for example, the green structure plans, in German Grünordnungsplan. This plan specifies requirements of the landscape plan, but has usually no legal force on its own in most of our federal states. So only specifications that find their way into the land use plan, the Bebauungsplan, are binding. So there is a possibility to promote biodiversity locally as part of development projects. And at the BFN, we have recently completed a project on green structure plans, which was led by the TU Dresden. One result was the development of a toolbox with a very, very large number of examples for different use cases and example formulations on individual topics, and formulations that can be integrated into B-Pläne, Bebauungspläne. So here, as an example, a formulation for a binding stipulation that explains how and where exactly an orchard meadow has to be created. If you are interested in a print version, just email an email, or just mail us to this mail address, or just follow the QR code for a digital version. Another instrument, but more an informal instrument for urban species protection, can be represented by municipal biodiversity strategies. Municipal biodiversity strategies aim to develop a planned and targeted approach for the protection and promotion of biodiversity in a municipality. So usually it includes a set of different goals and measures that were identified to be important for the local biodiversity. Here I just have chosen one example from the city of Heidelberg. Many other cities also have biodiversity strategies. It contains an overview of the different habitats within the administrative area of Heidelberg, and it contains recommendations and many measure examples, such as, for example, the connection of different habitats to promote the local biodiversity in Heidelberg. Also, the IOER was leading a project about municipal biodiversity strategies that was co-funded by the BFN. The main results were published in a guideline document on how to create such strategies, and the English version has just been published now. So if you are interested in this publication, you can follow this QR code, for example. Beside this, the BFN also provides financial support for new municipalities in terms of creating biodiversity strategies, and also in terms of the implementation of those strategies by the possibility to employ so-called biodiversity managers. So further information can be found on our web pages at BFN. Since I was asked to talk about examples from projects, examples from practice, I will now go on and present two projects with high focus on species protection at city scale. Since the IOER is located in Dresden, I'd like to present to you one project, the Naturschutzgroßprojekt Dresden Natur, which is led by the Environmental Office in Dresden. As it is labeled under the term Naturschutzgroßprojekt, I have translated this into large-scale nature conservation project. It has very ambitious goals and is meant to be a long-term project with high focus on nature conservation and the promotion of local biodiversity on a large scale. The first project started last year and runs usually for 3 years. And the goal is to prepare a plan, a Pflege- und Entwicklungsplan, a plan for maintaining and developing habitats. And on this map, you can see the areas that are subject of the first project stage. So within these areas, they are mapping the flora and fauna and also biotope types. And on this baseline, they are going then to identify hotspots, areas that are important to several species in Dresden. And then afterwards, they are going to start to define measures to protect and promote those species. And after this 3-year project, it is planned to continue and start a second project stage, which will last for 10 years. And this project will aim to realize those defined measures on areas that have been identified as important for local biodiversity in the city. Another project in this row is the Naturschutzgroßprojekt Natürlich Hamburg. This project has already been progressed to the second stage, namely the realization of a large number of different nature conservation measures. And on the map, you can see the areas that are subject to such measures. It can be seen that the action areas are spread throughout the city, including 14 nature reserves and around 20 parks and green spaces, for example. Within this project, they have set up a light build regarding a species-rich city that summarizes the agenda of all measures that have been identified and that have now or are now going to be realized. Here, just for an impression, some pictures of measures which they already realized. For example, on the top picture, you can see the creation of a small water body for tree frogs. And on the lower picture, you can see the creation of a sandarium for different insects. However, as urban nature and urban biodiversity are often associated primarily with green spaces and the animals and plants that live in them, I would like to focus now more on the species that are primarily dependent on settlement structures, such as, for example, buildings. So I will focus now more likely on issues and measures regarding the site scale in urban areas. So gray structures, such as buildings and their outdoor facilities, also provide important habitats for animals and plant species. For some protected bird and bat species, these habitats and buildings are even essential, as they can find substitute habitats in them that they would normally find, for example, in natural rocky landscapes. Many of these species populations are considered endangered in Germany, such as the house martins pictured here or the notch-eared bats, in German Wimpernfledermaus. Many of these species populations are, or threats arise, for example, from the risk of bird strikes on windows or disturbances of the animals by lightning on buildings. In addition to the legal obligation to protect such habitats in Germany by the Bundesnaturschutzgesetz, the negative population trends of many of those animals make the need clear that habitat structures on buildings, in buildings, and outdoor areas must continue to be maintained and also to be promoted. Accordingly, we are working on a variety of different topics at BFN for the research, for the promotion, and for the protection of building-related habitats. These includes, for example, green roofs and facades, or species protection during building installations, animal-friendly lighting systems, or the development of modular nesting aids, the natural design of outdoor areas, or the avoidance of bird strike. To illustrate this, I will show some examples of some of those topics. Already in 2016, a position paper on species protection during building installations was published by the BFN. It contains an overview on all relevant aspects in this field, such as the knowledge gaps and relevant stakeholder groups that were identified, and also recommendations are given for species protection measures, and you can follow this QR code for more details. Since the federal government has set a new target of achieving greenhouse gas neutrality by the year 2045, we have taken up this work again with focus on birds and bats. One area with high greenhouse gas savings potential is the building sector, which is responsible for around 30% of energy consumptions in Germany. So energy efficient renovation and installation of buildings can significantly reduce energy consumption for heating those buildings. But however, the insulation work also poses a major threat to many species that live in buildings, primarily birds and bats. Habitats can be destroyed by the renovation work or blocked by scaffoldings and nests, as you can see on this pictures, or nets. Therefore, we dealt with the following question: which specific situations can endanger animals in the course of renovation and how these risks can be minimized, and also which types of artificial nesting aids can be integrated into facades with thermal insulation and at the same time also being accepted by the animals. So we are looking for solutions and ways of combining climate protection goals with goals of species protection and search for synergies. As a first step, we have prepared a working aid and a brochure on this topic of species protection and building insulation and made them available to the construction industry and also to homeowners. These publications are based on a comprehensive literature review and expert surveys, and you can have a look inside by following this QR code. This research was done mainly by the NABU Rheinland-Pfalz. But it turned out that knowledge and data on the effectiveness of common bat roosts is still limited and incomplete. So the knowledge on birds and roosts and the effectiveness of roosts are much larger or better, but there is still a gap on information on bats and bats roost and their effectiveness. So for this reason, we have developed a project design for the next currently ongoing step, which initially involves identifying suitable methods for investigating the effectiveness of bat roosts. And yeah, this is one of the first keys to tackling the scarce data that is available on bats. Here, the Leibniz-Institut for Zoology and Wildlife Research in Berlin and the NABU Rheinland-Pfalz are involved as project partners, and the objectives are to summarize the current state of knowledge, and identify suitable methods to monitor the effectiveness of bat roosts. On this picture, you can see the detection and time recording of bats flying out of some installed roosts in Berlin. In a third step, the plan is to develop and test effective bat roosts, and these roosts are expected to be expandable for different bat species and already being integrated into insulation systems, in German Wärmedämmverbundsysteme. And in order to increase acceptance in the construction industry, the aim is also to certify those bat roosts in accordance with construction-related DIN standards. So much for a brief insight into our work in this area. Another aspect is the reduction of light pollution. So all around the world, we are observing the increase of lighting of buildings and other outdoor facilities. This exposure to artificial light has a negative impact on animals, plants, and also on us people. So, for example, migratory birds are attracted by strong light sources, which can lead to disorientation or also to bird strikes. Also, some bats avoid light, which results in changes of their hunting behavior, reduction in hunting time and quantity, and thus can reduce also their reproduction. In turn, insects are attracted by artificial light and thus are deprived to the actual habitats to other habitats with no corresponding foods. So for this reason, it is important to minimize light emissions from buildings and outdoor lighting and to use insect-friendly lighting systems. In this guideline, you can find recommendation for object lighting. So for example, the alignment of lighting from top to bottom, as you can see on the upper picture, and or recommendation on light colors such as light sources with a low blue component and more light sources with a warm white colors, in German Bernsteinfarben. Another aspect is bird strike on glass surfaces. Estimates indicate that over 100 million birds die from bird strikes every year in Germany, and especially due to transparency and reflections on glass surfaces. As you can see on these pictures, glass becomes an invisible barrier for birds. A very recommendable publication by the Swiss Bird Station gives valuable advices and recommendation for the prevention of bird strikes. Also shows the variety of effective prevention measures, such as the marking of glass surfaces, as you can see on the right side of the slide. If you're interested, just follow the QR code and you go through to this publication. Also, the design of outdoor facilities plays an important role in preserving and promoting biodiversity in urban areas. There are now a number of helpful resources that provide a wide range of helpful tips and recommendations for designing outdoor areas in a nature-oriented way. So, for example, the concept of animal-aided design, which is a planning method that aims to help better integrate the needs of animal species into the planning and design of buildings and their green spaces. As an example, you can see on the right-hand picture several aspects and objects that could be integrated regarding the needs of a house sparrow. For further information, you can follow this link, this QR code, and also search for resources on AAD, Animal Aided Design, at the web pages of the TU München, which has led this project. As a last aspect, I would like to present an ongoing project with innovative aspects. The project is called Urban Insects and is led by the University of Stuttgart. The focus is on creating habitats for insects on existing and new buildings in the public and also in the private sector. The Urban Insects project therefore aims to develop and test facade integrated habitat systems. Aspects of building physics, building culture, and social aspects will be taken also into account. And the project aims at developing facade integrated habitat systems for insects that not permanently harm the building fabric, such as, for example, the building function or the building appearance, and also do not harm the user comfort and the attitude towards insects of the inhabitants in the building, as well as the inhabitants and people in the surroundings of those buildings. The innovative content of the project lies in the first holistic consideration and combination of social concerns with those of nature conservation and environmental protection, as well as the available technologies into this important subject area. In this picture, you can see what such habitats could look like or can look like and how they have been integrated into different test buildings already. So I come to the end of my presentation and hope that I have been able to give you some good impressions of different aspects of urban species protection. And yes, if you have any questions further on, just ask in the discussion round, or you can also send me an email or search on our web pages at BFN. Thanks a lot.
Patrycia, thank you very much for giving you these impulses and insights. Great presentation. So please all reserve your questions. I'm pretty sure you have already questions in mind to be raised now, but we will keep them a little bit. Give us another 10, 12 minutes for an accompanying presentation from our IOER side. Done by Jessica Hemingway, as I indicated right in the beginning. And then pretty sure we will have enough time for questions, for points that can be raised here. Jessica, please.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the concept of urban environmental acupuncture. I only have 10 minutes, so bear with me. Let's see how much I can do in 10 minutes. So I worked on the concept of urban environmental acupuncture on a project called Salute 4CE between 2019 and 2022. The goal of this project was to develop natural resources through increasing the capacity of the public sector and related entities to improve an integrated environmental management of blue and green infrastructure. We co-produced a number of deliverables, including the action planning concept, action plans, methodologies for selection of sites, etc. And we implemented 16 pilot projects in Germany, Poland, Italy, and Slovakia. What is urban environmental acupuncture? This concept stems from urban acupuncture, a heuristic or planning concept derived from traditional Chinese medicine. The point is that the planning action should stimulate the city's nervous system and create a catalytic effect on the urban fabric as a whole to improve it. The characteristics of urban acupuncture projects typically are that they're low budget, they're rapidly implementable, and that the sites are small, making them abundant and usually unappealing for other uses. If you want more information about this, you can look at the publication in the right-hand corner at a later time. In the Salute 4CE project, we created a number of tools to foster social change. We conducted living labs in all 4 EU countries that I mentioned. We provided guided tours and demonstration of decision-making tools that we designed. We also had an e-learning course and certification in EUA in 4 languages. Additionally, a handbook, a guideline, and instruction in university classrooms together with students who also gave us input on these different tools that we created. After we implemented our pilot projects, I interviewed the practitioners in the 4 EU countries to see if these characteristics that we identified in the onset could be supported in practice. And this is, if you want more information on this, the information I'm presenting now is based on this publication in the right-hand corner that I published this year. So were the projects actually low budget? In fact, they were low budget because the sites were smaller, but as some of our city officials mentioned, we didn't look at a cost per square meter because there's some support in the literature that larger projects actually have a lower cost per square meter. However, with shrinking budgets, these small projects are still less costly. In order to keep a low budget, you also have to consider the type of nature-based solution. So perhaps a green meadow versus a green facade, the price difference of implementing those is quite significant. So if your goal is to keep a low budget, you have to think about that. Additionally, we have to look at the condition of the site beforehand. So do you need to replace soil or remove debris, or can you already start implementing the projects? You have to consider that as well. With an international project like we had, you have to consider also the labor costs were varied greatly between the countries. And also equipment costs need to be considered. If you want to have low budget projects, you really need to consider how much playground equipment, benches, things like that cost, if that's really a priority, or if the priority is really on the nature-based solution side. What we didn't consider, but what should be considered, is the cost savings due to these different types of measures. And also the role that citizens or volunteers play in keeping costs low, for example, and maintaining the sites. So I took these characteristics and tried to develop then principles for implementing nature-based solutions. For this, I suggest that to maintain low budgets, we would need to do this through strategic decision-making. The next characteristic that I talked about was whether or not the projects could be rapidly implementable. We did find support for this within our project. We could implement all the project within 3 years, even in a pandemic, across 4 EU countries, with all these co-creation activities taking place. But the co-creation time was time consuming, and you need to consider that also with public participation. And some of the countries, they weren't used to this sort of co-creation yet, but they did see the value in it. Even though the sites are small, you still need to consider all the formal planning processes, which can still be frustrating. Also, the public procurement process can be, complicated. Sometimes we didn't have enough bidders for these small projects, or there was a lack of knowledge on creating a green wall, for example. My idea, or I recommend bundling the projects, perhaps to speed up the process of implementation, or lessening requirements for micro projects. So based on this, I think that we can improve rapid deployment of UEA by streamlining the implementation processes. So we also, based on interviews, found that the small sites were indeed abundant and obtainable within these 4 EU countries. But it was influenced by the ownership. So if the city owned the property, we could, the sites were easier to obtain and utilize. Until now, and in these countries, the sites that were small and underdeveloped were undesirable for private developers or others. We didn't have high competition, so they were easy to obtain. They were also easily identifiable by residents and ideal for conducting living labs. They were embedded into the local fabric and helped increase social acceptance. I developed this principle, and I suggest that leveraging small and underutilized and abandoned urban spaces to expand implementation of nature-based solutions. We had success with this, but I conducted interviews with a colleague of mine in the Republic of Korea, and we found that in more dense settings, the challenge and demand for these small spaces was higher. So yeah, more research is needed there. So I also mentioned that UEA, or urban acupuncture, should have a catalytic or ripple effect. I haven't been able to measure what happened after project implementation, but we took a number of actions during the project to support this. So we implemented the 16 pilot projects. We co-created all these different decision-making tools, selection of site tools, a handbook, and all that I already mentioned. We identified many more potential sites to expand UEA beyond the pilot projects that we had, so setting the groundwork for further implementation. We include the public and other interest groups. We also found that city officials also showed continued interest in implementing UEA, and also using the documents created within this project to apply for further funding. We also created action plans in all 4 countries, which could also be used for further implementation. And the cities signed letters of commitment saying that they would further implement UEA. We also had, in general, a very good reaction to the concept. So in order to further implement nature-based solutions, we recommend catalyzing broader urban transformations through these types of actions. In conclusion, UEA and the principles provide actionable knowledge specifically addressing embedding nature-based solutions into planning and political frameworks and the urban fabric itself. It also helps to overcome barriers such as low budgets, expanding nature-based solutions where there's little space to do so. It also provides a vision for how urban transformation can take place, i.e. the ripple effect metaphor. The principles may also be used among co-creators to assess implementation of nature-based solution projects, as I just did now. Further research should test and document the current principles I provided here, and these principles may help improve the planning and governance of nature-based solutions. In regards to co-creation, it's essential for successful ecological and social change, especially regarding the impact and acceptance of such measures. Volunteers should be included in identifying potential UEA sites, implementing and maintaining them, as well as keeping the project costs low. And co-creation is also important for improving the principles in the future. For example, to streamline implementation processes, it will be necessary to collaborate with city administrators and politicians. So that was a quick view of what I've been up to for the last few years. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you very much, Patrycia. With this now, after a short break, very, very short, just few seconds for stopping our recording, we will go on with the discussion part. So thank you very much. Applause.